Hi, everybody, and thanks again for joining us with my good friend Julie Homrich as we continue to talk about resiliency that we build in ourselves and our families, attempting to have the best school year ever. And today we're going to talk a little bit about, in this segment, providing opportunities, and I find this to be a mouthful, providing opportunities that strengthen adaptive skills. And this was the one that's a real big issue for me, and that is self-regulatory capacities in our parenting. And while that sounds like, okay, wait, that sounds so ethereal, Chuck, I cannot wrap my head around it. It really gets down to the simplicity of how we act and react when children experience fear and failure. And so I know I've been guilty as a parent on trying to wrap my children in bubble wrap.
Same.
Both from a Christian perspective and just life, where I don't want them to ever be fearful and I don't ever want them to have to experience failure. But I think the therapist sitting here with me would say we don't truly grow without some fear and failure in our life. And spiritually, we know that's true. I mean, Paul teaches us all the time that, you know, there are parts of life we should be fearful of, and there are certain advantages to having experienced failure. And that's true as a parent and for a child to experience. So help us understand a little bit of what happens when we see and we allow our children to struggle some.
So I think at the core of that, as parents, we have a hard time seeing our kids struggle because it brings up anxiety in us. So if we allow our own anxiety to cause us to try to wrap our children in the bubble wrap, and we don't give them the opportunity to make mistakes, they won't learn resilience, right? So making mistakes and learning from them through the presence and with the presence of a supportive adult, walking with them is one of the primary ways that children strengthen their ability to adapt. So that long phrase of adaptivity, this is one of the pieces. So when we think about resiliency, both neurologically and in practice, it's built through what psychologists would say is rupture and repair.
Say that again, because those two words sound like something like the repair means, oh gosh, I failed. The rupture feels like, gosh, how'd I let that happen? But when I hear you explain this, it feels like apart from those, we're probably not allowing our children to mature,
to grow,
like God intended them to.
Right. The rupture is actually an opportunity for a new way of doing things. And the repair is you walking alongside the child and helping them see a new way of doing things. I literally tell my clients and my kids as well, mistakes help your brain grow.
Okay, that right there is worth watching the video for. Mistakes help the brain grow. Because mistakes, and again, I'm learning from you in all of these, but mistakes help us recognize and thus begin the process of building new neural pathways. We stay stagnant without the mistakes. So letting our children make a mistake might be one of the more helpful things we can do in our parenting.
Absolutely. And the second piece to that is then once they recognize it and we recognize it, we problem solve with them. We like to use the term failing forward.
I like that,
And when we do that, we're creating those new neural pathways and we're giving them to a solution, to a problem that it might not have ever been addressed if they hadn't had the opportunity to make that mistake and then walk through the recovery piece of it with a supportive adult.
And the supportive adult sounds like that piece where becoming a healthy parent is recognizing you are the adult in the room. So you can't just step in and just always be, well, bless your heart. There has to be a part at which you're supportive, yes, but you're the one that's kind of level-headed with a voice of reason. The world's not ending. Here's where we go from there.
We have a phrase for that. We like to say when you're in a room with a child and they're having a hard time, they're having a meltdown, we say be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Oh, that's so good.
And what that means, the thermostat sets the temperature of the room.
I love that.
The thermometer just responds to whatever heat or cold your child's bringing to the table in terms of reactivity. But the thermostat, you're calm, you're centered, your nervous system is in place. And if you need to take a time out to do that, go ahead.
You're almost better to step away if you need to kind of take a breath. I know I do that a lot these days where I may have a tense moment with a meeting or a difficult person, and I'm always better prepared when I take a moment. I breathe a little bit, I get focused on my breathing, I kind of settle and slow my heart rate and my soul down a little bit. I let my mind take a break for a moment, I get some clarity, and then I'm so much better at addressing the issue. Same thing for parenting.
Right, and you know, neurologically, our bodies produce those stress hormones we talked about. Takes about 20 minutes for them to metabolize in our bodies after we get worked up.
Wow.
So taking a little break is helpful.
20 minutes, I don't know that I've ever heard that before, but I know it's true in my life. It takes me sometimes 20, 25 minutes before I really can allow myself to just slow down, find a voice of reason, come back to a logical conclusion.
Especially if we're triggered, right?
Oh, let's not talk about that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, triggers are
we'll get there.
Yikes. So one thing that I see this happen, especially in pastoral counseling, where a parent of a first grader comes with a first grader mistake, and they want to act like it's life changing to the degree that their life will never be the same again. And I've heard you speak about the difference in little and big mistakes in little and bigger people.
Right, yeah, we want to give our children the chance to make little mistakes while they're little so that we can help support them and prepare them to avoid or be able to know what to do and work through big mistakes when they're big.
Yeah. Because I know that oftentimes I see in my office, because of whatever stage or season of parenting we're in, that failure or that fear has created a sense of failure and fear in a parent. And so now when you have a child and a parent in that same station, then their reason is out the window.
And that's a really good point, because when our children feel like they've made a mistake or like they're a failure, they need the parent to be able to be that strong force to encourage them, to help them move through, to help them move forward.
Yeah.
And if the parent's feeling like a failure,
it's an important piece in how we not only nurture but repair.
Right. And really, we talk about connection a lot and how connection is the most important piece in our relationship with our children. And we're human, so the connection between us and our children, it's going to rupture at times, right? We're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to think they needed something that they didn't need. We're not going to recognize something they did need. That's part of being human. But like we spoke about earlier, resilience being built through rupture and repair. I think sometimes we spend so much time as parents, if we have that kind of perfectionistic parenting style, we either try to be perfect in our parenting, which, let's face it, oftentimes leads to resentment or explosions because we've just built it all up inside.
Perfection, attempted perfection. It is a dangerous role individually, but as a parent, it is almost like passing on a sentence of failure in almost everything.
Yeah, well, it's impossible for your child to be perfect. So if we have that expectation, we're going to set ourselves up for perpetual frustration. But when we rupture the connection, if we have that perfectionistic tendency, we could either beat ourselves up about it or just, throw in the towel and be like, oh, they're just a bad kid or I'm just a bad parent. But we forget about the repair part, which is super, super important. And the rupture is inevitable, but we need to repair.
Because we're never going to be the perfect example of everything. We're not going to respond perfectly to all of our kids' needs. That's ridiculous to assume. Because, when I really start thinking about my parenting in the past, I think to myself, there were a million times at least that I could have looked at that and thought, I have failed miserably.
We all have those
we're never gonna get through this. And now they're in their 30s and they're experiencing those same things with their children because this has been going on from the beginning of time.
It's part of the process of parenting. And if we as people try to present this perfect front to our kids that we're a perfect parent and we never make mistakes and our kids don't see us make mistakes, they start to have a hard time with their imperfections and with their vulnerability. And they start to think, well, if mom always does everything perfect, I can't meet that standard. What's wrong with me? So we offer the modeling to be able to say, yes, I'm not perfect either, but Jesus forgives me and I'm receiving it and he can do the same for you.
Yeah, there is something inside of that I think I shared with you one other time where I think the most difficult day in my parenting was when each of my children recognized I wasn't perfect and acknowledged it. And it's like, oh boy, I've been able to live in this facade for these many years, and now it requires a different level of parenting from me. That comes with some authenticity, much more communication, and a greater degree of the extension of grace.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So a lot of times I think clients will ask, okay, rupture and repair, what does repair look like?
Yeah.
And so yes, it's saying you're sorry.
Right.
Of course, that's a piece to it. But I think it's a little bit more than that. We can learn as we're repairing something that I don't think comes natural to us, to seek our children's perspective in the rupture. So what I mean by that is we have our lens through how we see things. We have obviously a lot more time, a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge, but our kids also have their lens through how they saw the situation. And if we lost our cool, lost our temper, whatever it might be that caused the rupture, if we are able to apologize and then ask our child, what was it like for you when mommy yelled at you, or what was that like for you? We can hear from their perspective, and that it helps us understand them better and how they see things, but it also helps us in the process of repair, knowing maybe what we could do different next time. The second piece is for us to recognize our triggers.
Well, we all have them. I know I have mine. You said something a minute ago that I want to come back to, that when that last segment you talked about, it just kept screaming to me, this is all about intentionality.
Right.
Is my intention that I want to help develop my child to be able to overcome and keep moving forward in their development, both spiritually and physically and psychologically, I mean, every possible way. I have to allow myself to stop for a moment and be more so intentional about that communication than any other communication in my day.
It is. It requires intentionality and presence and awareness.
So that mindfulness, I've heard you use an analogy, HALT, H-A-L-T.
Yeah.
And I know you therapists are big on these kind of analogies. Or these, the little, what do you call
acronyms?
These? The acronyms. There you go. Leave it up to a pastor to screw up acronym and analogy. But the concept of HALT, though, it makes all kind of sense to me. When you broke these things out and you said, okay, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That's me right now.
It seems elementary, but those are very basic needs that if we don't have them met, we are going to be more likely to create more and more ruptures in our connection.
Yeah. So 2 of our 6 daughters, I never thought hangry was a thing.
Oh, it's a thing.
Yeah. So 2 of our daughters, literally, when we see it coming, we will stop and buy anything. To get past that, because we are on the verge of meltdown for no logical reason whatsoever. One of them is 30 plus, and one of them is now 22. Well, but it has been there from the time they were little people.
Research shows that when your blood sugar is low, your self-control is low.
Well, based on that, I must have a lot of self-control. So, all right, let's move on. But this is a big deal, recognizing triggers.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we have them, naturally our children have them, and we pass our triggers on to our children because they see it more plainly than we think they do.
Right, and we are oftentimes triggered as adults by the things we didn't receive as children. So if you find that you're having a really hard time when your child expresses those big feelings, as we like to call them, in tantrums and things like that, maybe take a look at where you allowed to express your big feelings as a child. So
those triggers and those big feelings, my oldest daughter, because I learned how to parent in a more critical environment. I think early on as a parent, I was more critical with her. Given her temperament, she didn't respond to that at all. And it was almost as though, Chuck, you've got to make a change in how you engage with Amy, because she was just such a sweet little girl that she needed to know that her daddy actually believed in her. Not with some, false bravado, but just the sense that, come here, let me hold you. I'll never forget, she was the only sixth grader that tried out for a basketball team that got the results on Halloween afternoon before the big party that night, that she was the only one cut. So all these girls try out for this basketball team. She's the only one that gets cut. And it hit me so hard that night that she needed her daddy to simply have a ministry of presence with her. And when I was watching the Olympics, and I watched that little girl who had such a horrible night on the vault, and then she won her silver or bronze or whatever it was, gold the next night. And I watched her daddy be the same way with her both nights. And I thought, that is what happens when you learn a new trigger and you learn there has to be a better way to nurture a relationship.
When we deal with our own parenting wounds, we are able to be that supportive presence with nothing really big blocking us.
Yeah, because I can imagine me coming home and telling my dad I was the only kid that got cut out of all these kids that tried out. And my dad would have said, well, what'd you do wrong? I don't know if there's anything wrong with saying that. I just know that in my case, had I been that parent with Amy, I don't know that we would have had the relationship we have today.
Yeah. And the temperament piece is a really big piece of recognizing what your child
because
thinks.
Amy and I couldn't be further opposite on the temperament scale. But as the parent, I needed to be the one that adjusted that.
Right, and that is the piece here, that even though there are things that we didn't get as children, we are the adults now.
That's right.
So if we didn't receive what we needed as a child, we are grown enough to be able to find it. We can find it, we can seek it out, we can get it through counseling, we can get it through our relationship with our Heavenly Father. And when we do that, we can be the adult in the room.
That's so good. But that leads me a little bit to this recognition that to be the kind of parent that I think God desires us to be. I mean, knowing our imperfections, but He modeled this sense of the extension of grace to us, unlimited. And what I've learned in parenting with our children is that if my child doesn't ever experience failure or heartache or failing forward, just all those things we've talked about, if they never have this time in which they realize, I need grace, odds are good they're going to grow up to be a person that never extends grace. But if they receive it when they need it, I have seen this happen over and over again, that they will grow into a person that extends grace.
Offer it.
And I can't help but believe, just watching the model of the Father and the Son, and I see the constant extension of grace, that as a parent, this might be one of the most motivating factors, because if there's anything I want from our daughters is that they learn to be people that receive and extend grace.
And then being able to recognize their need for it by not being perfect or making mistakes as the start.
Because mom and dad, they needed it.
And they know that their child is human and flawed and yet perfectly loved.
Yeah, and I'm going to have some people that are going to send me emails on this one. And it's Julie at. No, so here's what I'm trying to get at. And I think this is really dangerous territory, but I think it's really powerful. And that is when we don't stop and allow ourselves to be a person that extends grace to our children rather than just coming unraveled with them. I can't help but believe that when I look back at the experience of how the Father reacts in the story of the prodigal son, that God must look at His children that are parents and think to Himself, I know I didn't go wrong. So you can repair all these things if you'll receive a little grace from me. And rather than just trying to stockpile it for yourself, go ahead and open up the other end and let yourself become a conduit through to your children. And now, regardless of how you've parented for the past dozen years, grace is the great eraser of mistake. why not let God the Father do this work in your life to the degree that you can extend that?
Absolutely.
Because there's never a time that God doesn't stop and say, you're my child, come on. So then that's how we must respond.
Absolutely.
Like, I want to look at my little girls and say, I'm going to always be your dad. I don't care what. I'll never forget when I was walking one of my girls down the aisle, and right before we walk, I mean, the music has started, and she's grabbed my arm, and she hands me this handkerchief that she has embroidered on it. And she looks at me and she says, no matter what, Daddy, I'm so sorry for all the times that I've done stupid stuff, but I will always be your little girl. And literally, I just, I just lost it.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, this is what grace-based parenting looks like. Because it always comes back around. I think that's what Scripture talks about, that they return to it. They don't return to my rules.
They return to their relationship.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, you know what? These segments have been a lot of fun, and I've learned so much. I trust you have. Please make sure that you go to our ClearPath site, which is clearpathcounseling.org, and you'll find out more information that you and your family might find help from. And I know you'll know people in your family and in your circle of relationships that will find a time in which they need help. One of the best ways that you can be a help to someone is to point them to help. I heard a friend years ago, Julie, that said, there's an old Irish proverb that says, the very best friend in the world is the one who shares their friends. And I want to encourage you, let us be a friend that can help you and help your circle of friends. Just go to clearpathcounseling.org, and you literally can click on this little button that says start here, and in 10 minutes or less, fill out this short questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, Julie and her team will be able to get you directed to the right therapist and the right help. It could be resources, it could be pastoral counseling, it could be clinical support.
Right.
But in any way, we want to be a help to you. This state that we live in Georgia, is ranked last.
Right.
In being able to provide support for mental and emotional health.
Accessibility, yes.
And one of our great motivations is to provide that help for you, and to do that in such a way that is affordable, safe for you, and it's something that you can get to easily. And so I can't tell you how much I believe in Julie, how much I build in the team she's built, and we're here to serve you in the very best way we can. So thank you for joining us on all of these segments, and always be on the lookout for our blog that will continue to roll out, and continued resources from ClearPath Counseling. Julie, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun. God bless you guys. Go in peace.